Hello, my dear friends. So, you may have seen a post with me saying that I am right wing, coming out as right wing, which is true. It's something that I actually, you know, I wouldn't say is pure evil, because how you look at left wing and right wing now is, yes, back in the day, right wing was very dangerous, but now I don't see so, because the radical changes are upon us. I mean, on the surface, people say, oh, the Conservatives are right wing and the Labour are left. Well, yes and no. The thing is, the Conservatives have always played the evil, the game of being evil, but actually speaking their evil. It's only since we've had memes like Boris Johnson, who, in my opinion, Boris Johnson is the voice of the left. And you're going to say, oh, how can you say? Well, the thing with Boris Johnson is, you knew he was talking bullshit. You knew just he, you know, Boris Johnson, you knew the mistakes he was making, because if you heard Boris Johnson talk, anyway, that's how Boris Johnson talks. But in actual fact, even Boris Johnson became an actual meme. And, it's like, well, America's got their Trump. We need to have our version of Trump. But I liked Boris Johnson before he got in. When he got in, you knew he was going to be an utter... he knew he was going to make an absolute cock and balls of things. And Boris wasn't actually a bullshitter until he got into the driving seat. But the thing was, with Boris, he wasn't unintelligent, as people wanted to think, because he had been, he was mayor, he had a lot of people behind him. So the guy wasn't a complete fool like people wanted to think. And even when he was in power, like Thatcher, he had several people behind him. Now, it's left wing and right wing on a political scale. It's I've turned my back on politics, but really it's more to do with censorship. Because I absolutely hate censorship. If you don't know me all that well, or if you've not known me all that well, I absolutely hate censorship in music, and music is a form of art. I even hate censorship in video games. Video games aren't actually a children's toy. It's only bloody Nintendo that keep marketing video games towards... But if you look at PlayStation, PlayStation in the early days, before they got bloody oh crumbs, I'm trying to think of the game. Before they got Capcom on side, and Capcom, in my eyes, the reason why I have not got much love for Capcom anymore, one of the reasons, I'm going to talk about it on the Magic Silver Room podcast, is the point that basically is that yeah, is that they are well, they wanted. I mean, PlayStation were practically Nintendo. For those who know what I'm talking about, basically, Sony were developing stuff for Nintendo. In fact, there are some Sony cartridges with Sony graphics chips and Sony didn't create any sound chips for Nintendo because at that time they had already based the CD-based console, which was called, it wasn't called the PlayStation, it was called the Space Station. I'm not going to go into all the history of Sony and Nintendo, you can do your own digging. But when the PlayStation was, when it came onto the market, people knew this wasn't a kid's toy. And gamers realised, wow, this is what we've always wanted. But, you know, I mean, there's so many video games that are just, you can tell. One in particular is, well, there's been a few video games on the market. Creatures, Sanitarium, is it Kill Through or Through Kill? Rate Play, crumbs. There's been so many, like, really good games that have basically been, you know, like proper games that have real, you know, real horror added to them. But anyway, but music, music and art is what I'm here to talk about. And the whole Satanic Panic thing. Now, that is just a bunch of lefties. Yeah, you know, people commit suicide and all the rest of it, and people do evil things. Do your research. But then they blame the music industry and they blame the arts. And then there's people have their own beliefs, per se. Not that beliefs should be pushed onto others. You know. And now there's people that are pushing the narrative. They've got their own congregation. You know, I mean, even I mean, the education industry is so aggressive. The education industry's always been like that. You know, they want to mold their kids into the best thing that's since sliced bread, and technically that's not how it should be. But you see, you know, like getting into these things, the arts. I'm not talking about the following the money aspect. But it's I technically think that people, you know, I mean, there's the morals of the parents, and I mean the Stones were better than the Beatles because the Beatles were clean cut, and it was only because of Brian Epstein. It's the same. Like, it's the same with things like, uh, like power electronics was way better than industrial and punk put together, because even though power electronics was an offshoot from punk, it was way more heavier and way more aggressive than punk was. But the reason why power electronics even though that was parallel to industrial, it wasn't parallel to punk, because power electronics was doing something which industrial wasn't. Industrial was using, they'd learned from their music concrete teachers.
Instagram, now. Catherine Edgerson. Josh Corrington Music and Mad Lashes underscore.
Hang on, just go for this.
Notification. More. Dismiss. Alarm set. Image.
Yeah, they'd learned from the music concrete leaders. And they, bands like Throbbing Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire, to name a few, and like Nurse with Wound, they were the three bands that started everything off. But in actual fact, what you have to look at is, the post era of, the industrial movement, like the post folk and the post punk, because we went to things like David Tibet and Death in June and other bands that was so, like the Big Black. They were things to follow. But power electronics was doing things that punk wasn't, and industrial. Because even though the argument that the industrial people and the punk people were having was that article that was written by Mark Perry in Sniffing Glue, 3 Chords form a band, and the people in industrial were like, why have any chords? And that's the thing that's got me about punk. It's got its rules. It's why? If punk's trying to be something that if it's got attitude, You know, wouldn't just a couple of notes be okay? I mean, what you learn about punk in particular is people were trying to emulate, cheap versions of, these people weren't Hendrix or John Bonham or Keith Emerson, yet in doing so, these people became greats within their own rights because they didn't want to be anybody else. They were emulating what they were hearing. They weren't emulating the looks and you saw the brutalization of how all that went. But the thing with power electronics is you get bands like White House, which have this distinct sound and image, and nobody, you understand how that sounds. Oh, by the way, the synthesizer that Mummy's cleaning for me is going to be the one that I'm going to be using for brutal. The Arturia Mini Brute is great for making brutal noise music, so I'm going to be able to make some power electronic stuff with Lasercraft, and we've got like a super group type thing called Physical Retard, which is, anyway, that's another story. But getting back to the whole thing, I am totally against censorship. Like, bands censor so much, but also there is people that censor so much for the good of anything. I mean, if you want something so bad, why censor it? The best everything has to be censored to conform with the ways of the world. It's it's kind of, I mean, once these kids get to sort of 18, by 15 they'll have already, 15 or 16, they'll have already started running around naked, taking a drug of some form, and maybe trying to get to grips what the world is. And maybe trying to understand that for them, they're not getting that satisfaction. It's, if you're looking at this like a pretty painting, for example, you're looking at adolescence as a pretty painting, which it isn't. It's anything far but. And people just want to be free. And the left are like, oh no, this is not right. You know, not right for our children. They're going to be this killing spree. You know, it's, I mean, now there's so many people that, I mean, here's something I'm totally against. People, there's so many attention-seeking people out there. So many of them. And they're not the ones that will get on the soapbox at the end of the day. They're the ones that will crawl back to their little hole at some point. You know, if they've had their, you know, their fix. You know. And if you want people to recognize you, you know, carry a stick. That's the best symbol. Lanyards don't do anything. A stick will. You know, back in the day, people carrying sticks, it meant that you couldn't walk. Well, that's not actually the case. If you have a form of a symbol, somebody will help you. I mean, some people, it's good for them to have a lanyard with a sign on, but there's too many people that abuse that. But I just want to round off by talking about my two favorite album covers. I won't go into detail about the Led Zeppelin one. I will talk about it. The Houses of the Holy album cover, done by Hypnosis. It was actually done by, Peter Christopherson wasn't involved too much with it. He got it all sorted because all of these types of album covers where naked people were involved, he was always doing that sort of thing. He did the UFO one. In fact, Genesis Pierre Porridge from Throbbing Gristle and Cozy Fanny Tutti from Throbbing Gristle does a UFO cover where there's a couple in a bathroom. If you watch the Nardwuar interview, yeah. Anyway, so the Led Zeppelin Houses of the Holy album cover, it's basically two naked children in a bedroom. And the reason I like that cover is because of how vulnerability is stripped down from an artistic point of view. There was a guy who on YouTube described the album cover, and I was like, wow. It's probably one of the best for that reason. Not Forgetting the Houses of Holy is a really good album. It wasn't the best or wasn't the worst, but it is a good album, needless to say. And then the second is the first Throbbing Gristle album, which is the first annual report. And that album cover, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail with it, but every musician has the figure from that album cover somewhere. I personally don't. I am after it, but I'm not. I'm after the sleeve, but I'm not after the actual album. But anyways, I'll tell you what's quite rare at the moment. The Nine Inch Nails. Is it With Teeth? Because there's two versions to that album cover. Anyway, I'm done with talking about politics and album covers. The next video I do. Oh, by the way, I got my arcade machine today. Sitting downstairs. The screen does work on it, but it's a little LCD screen. But it's fantastic. It's like all these. Most of them are like old Atari games. Some of them are probably like really old Spectrum games, but it's just nice to have a little, arcade thing to just turn on. And I've not played everything on there. It's I think it's got like 26 games and it's stupid like that. Yeah. Anyway.
Tag friends button. Share it. Finish button.